What's up? I'm Jacob Litzo, your Elixir mentor. Today we will learn how to use JS hooks and event listeners. Using JavaScript allows us to handle tasks on the client side for UI-driven things. This allows us to not hit the server more than we need to. The purpose today is using hooks to manage the dynamic line numbers for our text area as we type. I'm going to pull up the designs here. And what we're working on today are the numbers next to our text input. So as we create our gist, this number will increase every time we return down. So that's what we're creating. Let's jump right in and open up our project. If we expand the lib directory, Elixir gist web, live directory, and then open up our create gist live.html.hex file, since we need to add dynamic line numbers to the left side of our text area, we want to add a second read-only text area to the left of our current one. To begin this, we want to create an outer div that will put our text areas next to each other. So right here, above our text area that we currently have, we're going to create a div. Let's put the closing div underneath our text area function, which is right there. Now we are going to want to add some CSS classes. We're going to want to do the flexbox layout. And then we also want to do the width. We want it to be the full width of the div that it's inside. Now inside this div and above our old text area, we want to add another text area where our line numbers will be displayed. Since we don't need this to be a piece of our LiveView form or validation, we're going to just use a standard CSS text area. So we can just do text area like this. I'm going to delete all this stuff here. And we do want to add an ID here. And we're going to call this line-numbers. And then outside of this, we want to just add a read-only attribute here. And that makes so the user can't add any inputs. And so we're adding the ID here because we will need it to access the element from the DOM when we are writing our JS hook. Let's create a CSS class to format this for us right away. So let's just expand assets, expand CSS, and open up our app.css file and find our text area. And underneath it, let's add our line numbers class. So we're going to do dot line-numbers and then opening curly braces, closing curly braces. And then we're going to just do our add apply like we've done before. And we're going to just go ahead and add the standard formatting that we want to this text area. And the first thing we want is we want a border, and we want this border to be white. And we want our font to be our brand font. And we want our font to be regular, not bold. And we want our text size to be extra small. This is all stuff that we've done in our other text area and stuff. We're kind of just repeating ourselves here. And then we want our text color to be our light gray. So that's going to be EM dark-light. And then we want our background color to be our dark. So EM dark-dark. And the height of this is we want it to match our text area, which is 300 pixels. Whoops, which is 300 pixels. And then we also want the width to be 54 pixels. And now the only reason that I know this is because I messed around and kind of allowed myself to hit like the thousands. I wanted to make sure a line number of 1,000 would fit in the width. And at 54 pixels, it does. And then we want our text alignment to be on the right side. And it just looks better as it counts up and is next to our line. So we're aligning it to the right. And then we want to set our overflow to hidden. And basically, if this were to get outside of the text area, it would be hidden instead of allowed to be outside of it. And then we also want to do our resize to none, and this will basically just make things scroll instead of making the text area bigger. And then we're going to do a semicolon, and underneath we're going to just use normal CSS here. And I just like to do this because it's easier to read. So we're going to just do our border dash right side. We want that set to none, because if you remember, like, we have our two text areas next to each other, right? So we're only going to need a border on the left side and the bottom. So we want our border on the right none, and we want our border on the top none, because the little header for the title, that's above us, right? So we want to set that to none. And that's all we need to do for that. But while we're here, let's go ahead and make sure our focus is set up the same as our markup text area. So let's just do line numbers, and then focus, and then opening curly braces, closing curly braces. And then we're going to do add apply. And we want to do focus colon outline dash none. We don't want it to have an outline when it's selected. And then we also want our focus colon border to be white. And then we want our focus ring to be 0. So we don't want that to be seen. And now that should match our other text area. And now let's add this class to our text area. So let's jump back over to our Heeks file. And up here in this div right here, our text area. So do class equals, and now we can do line dash numbers. And since we're here, we want to round the bottom left corner. So let's do rounded bottom left, and we want the medium curve so it matches our other rounded corners. Now we're going to add an EEX tag with a string value as our default value. And that we're going to do in between these two tags. And the EEX tag is this syntax. You'll recognize it from before. And we're going to just put a string here, 2 quotations, and then 1, and then a \n. All right. And this is to start the line numbering at 1. If we didn't put this in the EEX tag, the \n would not create a new line like we want it to. So let's go ahead and spin up our server and see what our UI is looking like. First, let's make sure that our Postgres Docker container is running. Mine is. If yours isn't, go ahead and start running it. And now let's open up our terminal and cd into our project. Mine is in Documents, Develop, Elixir Mentor, and then Elixir Gist. And now we just do mix space phx.server. Oh, we have an error. Let's see what we did here. Oh, I have a typo for font regular. So let's go back to our app CSS and fix front to font. Save that. And now it's rebuilt and we're good. And now if we just pull up our browser here and go to localhost 4000, we have to log in. Ignore the ugliness. We're going to be fixing this like us in a later video. So jacob@elixirmentor.com, and my password is Elixir Mentor. And there we go. So we're logged in. I don't like it full screen. So we're logged in, and we're pretty close, right? We need to fix our gist text area a little bit. We need to remove our left border. And we also need to remove the bottom left rounding here. And then I think this is going to look pretty dang good. So let's jump back into our project. And in our text area, border top, underneath this, let's go ahead and do border dash left and set that to none. Save it. And then in our Heeks file, we don't want rounded bottom anymore. We want just rounded bottom right. Save that. And now if we go back to our browser, there we go. So we have our initial value of 1 and then our code. And I just noticed that this is highlighting when we touch it. So our focus is not working. We're going to have to go check that out. So let's go ahead and go to our app.css and focus. We want it to basically, let's see, line number. Oh, line number. I had to put a plural. So add an S to our line numbers focus, save it. And now if we go back to our browser, now it does not select the border when we select it. So pretty cool. But as we type, our numbers still do not count. So let's jump back to our Heeks file. And we need to add an ID to our text area. So right here, let's just do ID : and we want to call this our gist text area. The reason that we need comma, don't forget the comma, we need to access this element from the DOM as well. So you need an ID or a name to do that. But now, looking at our UI, it's looking pretty awesome. So I would say we're ready to write some JavaScript and get this number updating dynamically. So let's do that. Okay, so in our assets directory, inside the JS directory, we want to open up app.js. And underneath our CSRF token right here, let's create some space. We want to create an empty object named hooks. And now remember, we're not writing Elixir, we're writing JavaScript. So it's going to be called hooks with a capital H, and then equals, and then opening and closing curly braces and a semicolon. So this object will be populated with custom hook definitions. Now, right below this, where you see our instance of live socket, this is where it's created, and we want to pass in our hooks object so the hook we are about to create is available to our LiveView components. And right after our params here, well, after our token is passed in as a param, we want to pass in our hooks object as a parameter. So put a comma and then hooks : that hooks is our key, and then we want to pass in our hooks object, which is capital. So now let's define a new hook called update line numbers right underneath our empty hooks object. And all we do to do that is say hooks dot and then the name of the hook that we want. And that's going to be called update line numbers in camel casing or Pascal, whatever you want to call it. And then this equals, and then we're going to do opening, closing curly braces and a semicolon at the end. Now inside of our hook, we need to add a lifecycle method called mounted. And that also has opening and closing curly braces. And this callback is triggered when the component is mounted to the DOM. And inside of our mount callback, we need to add an event listener that is triggered anytime an input event occurs in our gist text area, which will happen anytime a user types anything. And to do that, we're going to do this dot, and then EL is the element that is calling this event. So in our case, it is going to be our gist text area. And then, so this element dot, and then we're going to add an event listener, and then opening parentheses, and the name of the listener needs to be inside of quotations, and it's input. We're going to do a comma, opening and closing parentheses, and then an equal sign greater than. And then inside of this event listener is where we can call our code that will dynamically add our input, our dynamic line numbers. Input is a built-in listener. So anytime input is called, there is updates in our text areas. So it's just being called. And we need to call a function here that will update our line numbers. So underneath mount, so right here, let's go ahead and add a comma, and we can write our function right still inside of our hook, but outside of the mount. Our function is going to be called update line numbers, opening, closing parentheses, and then opening and closing curly braces. Inside this function, we want to create a constant here. So constant, and this is going to be called line number text. Now we need to grab the element with the ID line numbers. And to do that, we can do document.query selector. And then we, inside of quotations here, we do that and then a hashtag and then the name of the element that we want to have reference to. And we want reference to our line numbers. So we are grabbing this text area from its ID. Using the ID, we're grabbing the element in the DOM, and then we need to make sure it exists so we don't get any runtime errors, okay? Right underneath this, we just want to do if in parentheses, if it doesn't exist, so exclamation point, and then just line number text. And then if it doesn't exist, we just want it to return. And that'll save us from, any errors or crashes that we don't want to see. And then underneath that, we want to basically take the value from our gist text area and split it at the line breaks. So we're going to create an array. So constant lines is the name of our array. And we can grab the values from our text area. We don't have to do the query selector with the ID like we did for our line number text area, because the element that we want access to is the element attached to this hook, because we're going to be calling this hook from our gist text element. So now we just want to do this.l, which is element, .value. And so whatever value is in our text area, we'll have it now. And then we want to split it on our \n. So every time a user hits return, there'll be a \n there, right? So we basically just took the text area content and split it at the line breaks and made an array of each line. So now that we have the array of lines, we can create line numbers by looping through it. And so constant, we'll call this numbers. And then we just are taking our lines array and doing a dot map and then opening quotations. And then inside this, we could have the value, which we don't care about, but we do care about the index number. There we'll be able to grab the index, and then inside of this map, we'll do an equal greater than. We're going to take our index value, which in our case right now, it would be 0. And then we want to add 1 to it. And then we're going to want to join. And then every time we loop through this, we want to join our index number with the \n. And then when we're all finished looping through, we want to do a \n again to just have a new clean line. So we're adding the line breaks between each index, and this will put the number on a new line. Then we'll be able to take that number string and set it to our line number text value. All right, so now we have our line number text element right here because we grabbed it at the beginning, and then we looped through all the lines that are currently in our gist text area. And all we have to do now is do line number text dot value and set that equal to our numbers string here. So numbers is a string of indexes with the line breaks in between each one. And so now our line number value is set to that. So now all we have to do is call this function from our event listener up here. So now we just have to call this function, and we can do this dot update line numbers. And so every time that our input event is called, we are going to call update line numbers. Now we also want to call it right when our element is initialized. So underneath this event, we're also going to say this update line numbers and call that function outside of the event callback. And this way, if we load the page and a value already is in the text area, it will have the line numbers. I think our hook is ready to test. So we need to call it from our gist text area element though. So make sure this is saved, and then let's hop back over to our Heeks file, and we need to add a phx hook attribute that calls our update line numbers hook. And we can do that by just inside of our text area here, add a phx underscore hook colon, and then in quotations, we just call our hook we just created, which is called update line numbers, and then close those quotations and add a comma at the end, and then save it. And now let's test this out, and let's pull up Firefox. All right, so now when I hit enter, we should see a number 2. Ooh, so numbers are showing up. That's really freaking cool. So now if we, but wait a minute, when I switch text fields, we lost our numbers. One way we can fix this is to ignore our text areas during DOM patching. That way it won't re-render and it will maintain its state. This is easy, and we just need to go back to our Heeks document, and in our outer div here, we're just going to do phx-update equals and set it equal to ignore. But to use this, we also need to now add an ID to this div. And so we just have to do ID, and then we'll just call it gist wrapper. Okay. And now that the line numbers and our input should no longer get cleared out, let's go ahead and look. So now if I type blah, 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 and I switch fields, okay, our numbers are now maintaining. But we have some more issues. And I didn't want to make this video longer than we need to, but in the next couple of videos, we're going to fix these. And the first issue is if we keep typing, once we start scrolling, you'll notice our text area here, it scrolls, but our numbers stop at 18. And it no longer counts and moves. And we don't want that, but don't worry, we're going to fix that. And the second issue, since we set phx-update to ignore, when we create a gist, a description, file name, when we create it, it no longer will clear itself after it's created and persists a new gist to our database. We'll fix that too. Now, even with those couple of issues we have to address, this is really cool. We are dynamically adding line numbers as we type, and it's client-side driven, so we don't even have to hit our server for these fast changes. Hopefully you see the power behind using JS hooks and event listeners in our LiveView projects. As always, if you need help or want to check out the solutions, check out the GitHub link in the description. Join my Discord server, Elixir Mentor, if you have questions or want to hang out and chat. That link is in the description as well. If you want to learn how to build scalable, production-ready, full-stack, and REST API solutions, hit that subscribe button now. I'm Jacob Litzo, your Elixir Mentor. See you in the next video.